join me in welcoming Monsieur Cal Harrison.
Thank you, Kevin. Everybody hear me back there? Gail, how's it going? Good. So, my name's Cal Harrison. This is feeding back a little bit on me. How does that sound better?
Yeah. I'll tweak it here.
Okay. I'm from Dauphin, Manitoba. I have a degree in English from the U of M. I have a diploma in advertising art from Red River and an MBA from the U of M. And I'm a certified management consultant. And I was explaining to Jesse earlier how I was run out of Dauphin 43 years ago for biting the kid next door. They don't like that in Dauphin, so they made me leave, and my family came with me. I started off as an artist in the art department of an ad agency, and we used to respond to RFPs like crazy. Won very few. I'm not sure I'm as optimistic as Kevin about how I'm going to change your win percentage here. My first goal is for you to waste less money and less time making decisions earlier and more accurately about when to walk away from them. Secondly, how to win them if you can. And thirdly, how to try and change the system overall. How are we doing so far? Anyone got any questions for me? Who's got a Jets app? Feel free to just put your hand up when you get an alert saying that there's something significant in the game. Okay. So this presentation was recently delivered by me online for Marketing Profs. So if you are a Marketing Profs member, there's a video version of this in their archives. I've been railing about the RFP for a long time. Gail and I used to work together at the government where we issued them, right? So we've got an interesting perspective from both sides. It's funny because I was just thinking, when you show up to these things, you're always wondering how many people are going to show up. And I know I'm fighting the Jets, and I know I'm fighting the first potential snowstorm of the season. I didn't even want to come out. So the crowd makes sense. But it occurred to me that the smallest and the largest crowds I've ever spoken to were in the same U.S. city 8 years apart. Any guess what city that might have been? It's where you'll want to be in about 3 months.
Miami?
Close. She's closer. Tampa. 6 people in 2006. But I managed to build an entire family vacation around it and write off most of it because it's a business trip, right? And then I think it was about 250 this past February in Tampa for a conference. I paid my freight to get down there and do the one for 6 people, but it's funny when you're speaking for 250, they want to give you money and pay for your airfare and all that stuff. Anyway, it's a pleasure to be here. Let's talk about RFPs. This is what I mean. Because Matthew and I were talking earlier, and he's a student, and he's kind of like, what do I mean by request for proposal or RFP? And in fact, I was doing a presentation in Chicago a few years back, probably like 10 years back, and there were a bunch of people who kind of looked like you, and a middle-aged lady stood up and said, what's an RFP? Whoa, that's a neat effect. What's an RFP? So, request for proposal issued usually by some government agency or bureaucracy as a way to structure the acquisition of some good or service. Today, we're going to talk about only professional services. I haven't told you much about what I do, but for the last 13 years, I've been a management consultant. So what does that mean? I focus on serving the professional services sector. So my clients are architects, engineers, lawyers, accountants, web designers, graphic designers, ad agencies, anybody who's selling their expertise for a living. And many of you, I'm sure, would fall into that category. I'm not talking about snow clearing or grass cutting or those kind of commodity services. I'm talking about expertise. And what do I advise them on? Sales and marketing, right? So one of the ways you get business, potentially, is to respond to an RFP by writing a proposal in response to that. And we're talking about expertise, not hours. I think I just said all this. Architecture, engineering, management consulting. Because nobody goes into any of these professions because they love the idea of becoming salespeople, right? If you wanted to become a salesperson, you would go into insurance or financial services or car sales or something, right? And you would get trained appropriately and you would grow up in a culture of sales. And then you become one of these things and you realize it's project-based. And if I don't have this steady stream of new business coming in, then I'm going to starve. So you want to learn to do that as efficiently as possible. And exactly as Kevin mentioned, the RFP looks like this perfect place to go get new business because they're just putting it right out there saying, here, come and get this, take it away, bill us. But it's not really that easy. So let me talk to you a little bit about RFPs. One of my clients is an architecture firm. The federal government, actually it was the RCMP. This is being recorded, right? Yeah, great. Not the RCMP. No, they already have a file on me, I'm sure, because I put this out into cyberspace for a while. The RCMP puts out a construction contract for $500,000. So an architect typically gets paid as a percentage of the construction cost. On a good day, that's 10%. So the architect who wins this RFP is going to get $50,000. And like magic, we have $50,000 here. And my client sends me the RFP because he said, Cal, this is brutal. This is, it cost them $20,000 to write the proposal to respond to the RFP. They're only going to get $50,000 if they win. Now that's what you would call the opportunity cost or the retail price. So if they charged someone to write that document, they would have charged them 20 grand. Their hard costs were about 13. So still, 13 grand is a lot of money to risk trying to get 20. 38 firms responded to that RFP. The industry response cost was $760,000. So the RCMP procurement person issued an RFP to make a decision that was fair and transparent and good value for the government to make a decision about who to give $50,000 to. But by doing so, by structuring the RFP inappropriately, by asking for too much too early, detailed estimates, detailed processes, all of which are going to have to be redone when they select a winner. They forced the industry to invest $760,000 to respond to this thing. So that doesn't also include the cost of the RCMP, in this case, to evaluate 38 proposals, because that takes some time too, right? So should this be the RCMP's problem? You know, a reasonable response might be, hey, Cal, that's just the cost of doing business. You guys are going to have to write proposals. You can choose to write $20,000 proposals or not. Fair enough. The only problem is that $760,000 has to be covered by somebody, right? And that somebody is ultimately the RCMP and everybody else who buys architecture services. Because architects aren't going to take a loss every year so that because someone has an inefficient buying process. They're going to build this into their hourly rate, right? So every time someone's buying architecture services or management consulting or legal fees services, they're paying for all the proposals you wrote that those architects and engineers, et cetera, wrote and lost and never got paid for, right? At the end of the day, they have to make that money back somehow. So what I'm saying is, as an industry, it's in the best interest of the buyers if we can all sort this out. Maybe that should have been 12 firms responding. Maybe the industry was inefficient in making decisions about whether they should respond or not. Maybe they're just playing chase the RFP. It's like, remember Nick Hill? He used to run those commercials. Number one son left the couch making machine on last night. It's like, oh, we left the proposal writing machine on last night. Just crank them out and get them out there. But if the buyers slim down the process, make them more focused and less onerous, we all win. There's an interesting thing going on in the city right now, right? You read the paper today? You don't usually see the word RFP in the paper very often unless it's actually in an ad for an RFP, but it's all over this article, like how the fire hall thing went wrong. And you know what the sad part is? The gut reaction to that is, in a nutshell, if you're not following this, an RFP was put out, and it's my understanding that it was written so specifically that only one firm ultimately responded, and that was, we know which firm that was. So the gut reaction will be, everyone should say, to be fair and transparent, we should have had hundreds of responses. But if we do that, we get into this scenario. There's a mid-ground. It needs to be specific enough so that maybe 30 of those firms would have been able to say, by looking at it, we don't have a chance here. But it should have been broad enough that 8 firms may have had a realistic chance with maybe 2 or 3 obvious short lists, right? So now take this and multiply it by all the RFPs done in Canada. And my estimate is that we are wasting billions of dollars writing proposals that will never have a chance at winning anything. So when the government's talking about what we need as a country to innovate, well, you know what, if I didn't have to spend all that time writing proposals, maybe if I could cut that back a little bit, I'd have some time to invest. My people could train themselves in other things, or we could innovate in other ways, right? But if that's what the process demands of me as a business owner, I'm going to, it's kind of hissing and popping a little bit, right?
No, it sounds good.
Okay? I'm not slurring my S's too much because I've been drinking all day. Okay. So, I'm saying it's a rarely functional process that we're wasting billions of dollars. Billions, literally, in Canada alone. Whereas let's take that and give that to smart people and have them fix the problems of the country instead of just writing proposals and killing trees. This is actually the Tripwire guys videotaped me at the Park Theatre last year sometime doing a Pecha Kucha, if that's how you even say it, on RFPs where I was throwing out some numbers. I did this little experiment once on Mercs. You all know what Mercs is? Doesn't that sound very Southern to me? You all know what Mercs is? So I looked at all the professional services RFPs in 3 categories: management consulting, IT and telecom, architecture and engineering. And I looked to see what were the fees, and based on my estimates, did the industry spend more money writing proposals than one of them was going to win for the fees? Just like we saw that upside down $760,000 versus $50,000 ratio. In this video, which is on my website, beyondreferrals.com, 17% of the time that was upside down. So 17% of all consulting RFPs generated more cost in proposal writing than someone was going to win in fees. IT and telecom, 33% of the time. And you'll hear me say in the video that if you have kids thinking of becoming architects or engineers, you might want to show them this video, because 67% of the time, more money was spent writing proposals than architects were going to receive. Architects are the worst, and they will tell you they are. They give away their thinking, their designs in competitions, right? Question? No?
No. Since my hand was up and you caught me, are there ways that they have to protect their IP when they put in?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you'll hear a lot of architects say things like, yeah, we kind of saw, our spire here and their staircase there, and like things that mash together, and you see that with, that's a really big ethical issue. But we'll come back to that later, maybe. Anyway, rarely functional process. There's the great Tripwire video. There's this thing in the States. Has anyone heard of the Brooks Act? No? Okay. Before I do that, Matthew, I'm clear on what an RFP is and the issues? Yeah? Okay. So in the United States, there's this federal legislation called the Brooks Act. And if the federal government in the U.S. is procuring architecture or engineering services, they have to do what's called an RFQ, request for qualifications. And it's a 2-step process. Or if you're American, it's a process. 2 envelopes. One is, here's why we are qualified to do this work. And the second envelope is, here's what our price is. So what they do is they evaluate the qualifications of the people that have proposed, and they pick 3 that are the most qualified, 1, 2, and 3. And they say, number 1, you're most qualified. Let's go over here together and open your envelope and see how much money you're telling us it's going to cost. And then we'll start negotiating from there, right? So this way, what happens is you always get the person most, or the organization most qualified to do the work, and then you try and find some price that's going to work for the 2 of you. And if you can't come to some agreement on price, you go to number 2. Say, number 2, you're second most qualified, but that's still good enough. So let's see what you quoted, right? Typically what we see in Canada is write a 100-page proposal. There's maybe 90% of it is weighted on qualifications and stuff like that. The scoring's going to be so tight that everyone's going to be effectively tied after the 90%. The tiebreaker becomes price, because price is part of the one-piece proposal. Price becomes the winner. We see that far too often. So what I'm suggesting is that we go to more of a request for qualifications type model. And we'll talk about some of the issues with that and some of the pushback I get, because I do every now and again I'll do a seminar where I'll take 25 buyers, so Hydro, MTS, the province, the feds, those kind of non-industrial, big procurement entities. They buy a lot of professional services, and I'll get them in a room with 25 people who sell professional services, architects, engineers, lawyers, accountants, etc. And the last time we did this, I think we had 2 slides. Gail, were you at that? No? No. You weren't at any of those combined procurement consultant events I did at the Manitoba Club, were you?
No.
Okay, so good, then I can lie all I like and no one can catch me. So we had 2 slides. We went for half morning, we had 2 slides. The first one was, hello, my name is Cal Harrison and welcome. And the second slide is, you both complained to me about the RFP, so let's fix it. And then we had a half day of discussion. And my concern was that, and at one point I actually thought maybe we should have some form of security here, because we've got the buyers and the vendors who, maybe they're going to go at it, and what am I going to do if they do? Mostly they're senior citizens, so I figured I could handle it if it really got rough, or I could at least outrun them. But what I found was the biggest amount of bickering was within the procurement community itself, bickering about the processes they use. So why is this? When I look at procurement, so people who buy things as a profession, they're typically trained really well in how to buy commodities, so products. If you're buying toilet paper, you can define all the variables and let price be the tiebreaker, right? I need this many sheets per roll, this many rolls, this much weight per sheet, blah, 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 free on board, delivered to this location, who can do it by this date and what's your price? You win. When you're trying to buy professional services, you don't even know what you might want. We need a museum of human rights. Let's start defining all the variables. Well, you can't do that, right? So what you need to do is find other ways to select people. That's what we're going to talk about today.
Now, can you just explain that RFQ again? The first part, did they actually hand in 2 envelopes at the same time? Or
Yes.
the second envelope after they've been accepted?
2 at the same time. So the price never comes into play unless you've actually won the opportunity based on your qualifications, your expertise to do that kind of project. And then when the price is opened, it's the starting point of a negotiation. Because now you can have an interaction with the client, and you can maybe point out some things that they never considered, which could impact price. And that could include ways to save money, right? There are different ways to design and build buildings. And I keep talking about architecture, engineering a lot. The basic principles apply to any sort of professional services. Whereas now, in most typical RFPs, you're often not allowed to have any sort of communication with the person issuing the RFP during the RFP process, except through official channels. So you can ask a question, which they will answer, but they will then distribute to all people who receive the RFP, which I'm arguing is an unethical process, and we'll deal with that later. And when you can't have a discussion, it's, as a vendor, you know that, well, you don't want to sell this short. You don't want to have to work for a year and make no money because you've underbid it. So maybe you're going to be a little higher. It's hard to provide a really insightful solution when you can't have any sort of interaction with the buyer. So what I'm suggesting is, sir.
A quick follow-up on that.
Yep.
On the Brooks thing. So if your second envelope has your price and you're the most qualified, it probably makes sense for you to have a price that has a lot of safety margins built in to start the dialogue with, and then can gradually get shrunk down as you have more dialogue, or because you could get something at a lower price.
That's a good question. It could go either way, probably. That would be one very reasonable scenario. Another might be that, no, you don't have to do all these things. We've done so many of these museums. We know that the process can be done quite effectively. In fact, we're groundbreakers at blah, blah, that. So there's opportunities on both ends. That's a good point, though. But here's a challenge. So, yeah?
This system we have in the States, does it have to be a 2-envelope system, or can it just be, we're going to qualify you as, based on 1 envelope, the 1 proposal, and then if you're number 1, then you can come back with an estimate?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's I don't know the legislation well enough, and so it's a federal legislation, but then there's a whole bunch of what they call mini Brooks Acts. So not provincial, state governments are saying, we like that model, let's use it, but we're going to modify it a little bit. So, federally it's standard, but state to state it could vary a bit. Personally, I wouldn't ask, if I was issuing this stuff, I wouldn't ask for an estimate. I wouldn't waste all that time, because that's where the $760,000 creeps in, is when you're putting all this time in to try and detail budget something, right? And the fear is always that if you put a number out, you're going to be held to that. Now, that's technically not what happens in the Brooks Act, but so yeah, you don't want to be shy. So I don't know, sorry. So the idea is, instead of getting all these people to do all this work up front, let's just find out who's the most qualified, and then we'll start getting them to do a bunch of work, right? That's how you take the fat out of the system. So it's not making it easy for anybody. It's not making it like, oh, that company's going to have an advantage. Everybody has the similar level of difficulty, but you don't waste a whole bunch of time, right? I have clients in the architecture business, which I keep talking about, who work around the globe, and it is not uncommon for them to spend more than $100,000 writing a proposal. The Winnipeg Art Gallery is undergoing some renovations. One of the shortlisted companies, I think they only have like a $13 million budget. Is that right? It's not like it's it's not like it's 13 billion anyway. But you know, there were firms flying from overseas to present in that RFP process. Right? So you want transparency, you want accountability, you want there to be a level playing field, but you also want to take the fat out of the system. So if you're responding to an RFP, you have one decision to make. Should I propose or not? Right? Should I write a proposal in response to this RFP? So you're asking yourself things like, what are my chances? Is a $20,000 investment to win $50,000 in fees a good idea? And you see people get buck fever, like when hunters start shooting at anything in the bush that moves because they're so excited about shooting something. When chances are small that you'll win and the potential fees are small, the economic utility deal to you is low, it's easy to walk away. But when your chances are small and the number's huge, people start to go a little crazy. I got a 1 in 38 chance, you think. Is it worth doing that? So what you might want to do is when you're making these decisions, you might need more information. You might want to try and change the RFP to your advantage. Now that seems like it would be unethical on your part. But remember, your job is to win. They define the rules. Your job is to understand the rules and exploit them to your advantage. Sometimes it makes sense to propose because it's an audition for the next opportunity. If you're calling some deputy minister, for example, and trying to get in front of them to tell them about how great you are doing videos in healthcare, or Ukrainian heritage villages around Dauphin or something, I don't know. And they're not returning your calls. I know firms that'll write a proposal just so that that minister has to read the proposal, or the decision makers have to read the proposal, and suddenly now they know that your firm exists, right? I wouldn't say that's a really great strategy. Certainly not the one you should try and build a business on, but more of a long shot. So with this session, help you make better go, no-go decisions. There's software out there I've seen for that and I've not been impressed with. How can you change the RFP? And that doesn't necessarily mean change the RFP so you can win it. It means change the RFP so you have to invest less time to respond to it, meaning everyone else has to invest less time, so it still is competitive. We just take the waste out of the system. And how do you make your proposal better if you can't get the RFP changed? And how do you really win RFPs? Because one of the things I do for my clients when I'm working with them is I'll talk to people who have bought their services. I'll talk to people who have never bought their services and they're wondering why. And that includes government buyers. And I'll talk to people who they wrote proposals for or did presentations to, but those people chose to go with another firm. And I'll have very candid conversations with the buyers about why they chose to do that. And I can tell you what those buyers are telling me, and maybe it'll help you. I'm standing right in your way, am I?
I can see it.
There was a day when I could turn sideways, and that day is gone. So what are your odds? Going back to the architecture proposal, it's not 1 in 38. It's not 1 in 4, which you think it is. It's someone usually has an advantage. Sometimes we think it's the incumbent that has the advantage, and that may or may not be so, because sometimes an incumbent, someone who's already worked with this firm, may know things you don't know and can't know, and that won't be revealed in an RFP, but they know them because they've worked with this client. But sometimes there's an RFP because they didn't like working with the incumbent. It's often hard to tell which way that's going to go. And no procurement person is going to say, we hate them, we never want to work with them again, so we're issuing an RFP, right? They're never going to say that. So if they're not talking to you, if they don't know of you already, if you're coming in out of the blue and expecting to win it, you probably don't have the advantage. So these big cattle call RFPs are a long shot typically. So who is it? I don't know. It's hard to tell. First question is, can you do the work? So do you have the capacity to do this? Can you deliver this kind of work profitably, especially if you have an idea of what it's going to take to win? Can you meet all the mandatory criteria? And can you meet the RFP deadline? All this kind of simple stuff, right? Can we do this work? Can we actually meet the RFP deadline? If something here says no, then of course you give up. The next question is, can you win the work? And there's a mile-wide gap between we can do this work versus we can win this work. So when you look at every category, and you should know your competitors, can you score top 3 in every category, right? Go category by category. If you were evaluating what you think you would submit in your proposal, can you win every category? If you can't, then what do you need to do? Can you improve your proposal? Can you communicate better about things that you're doing? Can you improve your capabilities and expertise, possibly by strategic alliances or partnering or maybe hiring or training some people? And, or can you improve the RFP evaluation criteria? So you're probably wondering, how could you, the vendor, ever influence the RFP evaluation criteria? And I'll tell you how. But if you can't do any of those things, you've got to ask yourself why you're proposing. So I have a standing offer, not the federal government kind, but I have a standing offer for any of you. And I just got one of these sent to me today. If you ever see a bad RFP and you wish that someone would take that up with the issuer, send it to me. And I'll be happy to do so. I actually emailed the RCMP about their RFP, and they didn't respond to me. That's a fairly typical response, although I'm sure they started a file on me somewhere. I had one for a local arts organization who was sent to me the other day. And I contacted them, and it was brutal. It was a horrible RFP. And they just said, we don't care. We're probably not going to issue something like this again. And we got like 5 people that responded already, so who cares? And then I'm going to send kudos to Red River College, because 2 RFPs came to me for 2 different types of professional services within about a week. And they had some significant flaws in them. So I emailed the VP there and said, you know what, let me tell you about this because I have it in some slides. So if you have a bad RFP, if you've seen one, before it closes, send it to me and I might be able to get it changed. Maybe not, but we'll go through that Red River example. But this is how I think it should be handled. So the people there did a good job. So we've talked about this, a losing proposal as a presentation tool, but this is not a loser's rationale. You shouldn't be saying, well, at least we got in front of them. You should be saying, are we going to invest the time to get in front of these people? Will it be effective enough to invest all that time? We're going to talk about bad RFPs based on 4 criteria. And there's probably 10, but the 4 we're going to talk about is no budget identified, an RFP that's requiring free consulting, or one where questions and answers are shared, or where, this is the worst one, where evaluation criteria are unclear. So this last one, if the evaluation criteria are so broad as to not exclude anybody, which is the perspective some procurement people take, everyone should have a chance, then you're going to have waste like we saw with the $760,000. If they're so narrow that only one company could possibly fulfill that, then there shouldn't be an RFP. There should be a request for sole sourcing, right? Which is usually posted, and the industry is allowed to challenge that intention. But you don't have a bunch of people writing or attempting to write. So a bad criteria, there's no clear definition, and we'll go through this in detail in a bit. No obvious weighting and no scoring rubric. I've never heard of that word rubric until, because for 10 years I was a sessional lecturer at the U of M and the U of W, teaching organizational behavior, and one day someone in administration said, what's your scoring rubric? And I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. But it's okay, because I was only marking tests for about 5 years at that point. And he said, it's the rules by which you will determine who gets an A and who gets an F, right? That's what evaluation criteria are. An RFP should say, here are the rules that we will use to evaluate you. And based on these rules, it is obvious that to get 100% in a category, you would have to show us this. And to get 0%, you would have to do this, right? This is the biggest problem in most RFPs today. So when there's no budget, if there's no budget, many firms say no proposal. And I see this time and time again. Let me give you an Alberta government example. Alberta government issues an RFP for graphic design or something related to for graphic design. I think 22 firms responded. Everyone asked for the budget. They said, no, we're government, we can't give you the budget. And that's just crap too. But 22 firms responded, and all in the $75,000 to $85,000 range. And you know the Price is Right? What happens when everyone's overbid? All you people are on TV. You don't know what the Price is Right is?
Start again.
Yeah, right. So there's a buzzer. You're all overbid. Bid again. So what's the lowest bid? We know we have to be lower than that. They did it again. About 6 firms said, forget it. We're not doing it for less than 75 grand. So, about 16 or 17 firms went through it again, asked what the budget was. They wouldn't tell them. They went through this a few times with firms dropping out each time. I think about the 4th time, they're in the $5,000 or $6,000 range. That's what their budget was. But they had multiple, literally almost 24 firms writing proposals without the most critical piece of information. This is the greatest scoping tool in the world, right? I tell procurement people, define the budget and then let people come back and say, here's what we can do for that budget. What procurement people like to do is say, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. Here's all these variables. Tell us how much it'll cost. Invariably, they cannot cover all the variables, or there's different ways to interpret the variables. So then you have to have elaborate scoring systems to say, well, here's how we got dollars per point of value, blah, blah, blah. The easiest way to buy on value is to take price out of the equation by telling everybody what the price is. And then all they do is drive value into it, right? So a lot of firms say, if there's no budget, we're not even proposing, because they've been caught on that too many times. They've written proposals for an $80,000 project for a client that's got a $5,000 budget, right? So, and if there's no budget and price is weighted heavily, then run away as fast as you can, like that.
Cal, I don't know if this is well, it's definitely not the same scenario, but I don't know if you have a comment related to this or not. How would the scenario play out with an employer? Should they list the budget for a job that they're hiring for, or should they, or could they reasonably say salary commensurate with experience and so on and so forth?
That's a good question. I think it makes sense to say, here's what we expect to pay for this, right? And if nobody applies for the job, you've got some valuable information, right? So there's a direct parallel there, I think. And we're going to talk about some reasons why someone would say, I don't want to give you that information, and how you would respond to that. Because you can use this when you're buying stuff too, right? We like to keep our cards close to our chest and not tell anybody what we're doing. So plan A, there's no budget? Ask them. Just call them up or email them. What is the budget? Not a big chance. These are just my numbers. There's no science to 25%. It's just like, yeah, I think maybe a quarter of the time. If they haven't provided it, they'll give it to you. And say, look, if you give me the budget, I'd like to drive value into my proposal instead of trying to guess how much money you have, right? So you frame it as a benefit to the buyer when you're talking to them. I don't want to waste your time coming in with a $100,000 price if you got $50,000 to spend. Sometimes then they'll give you a budget. Plan B is, don't just tell me what the budget is. Tell everyone what the budget is. I encourage you to do that, because then this might tip them. But if they haven't given you the budget when you first asked it, they're unlikely to do it here. And just tell them, look, if we're all the same price, it's way easier to tell who should win. The first time I mentioned this in a public presentation was probably 15 years ago, and like 2 guys from Hydro, who'd probably been there since electricity was invented, put their hands and said, Cal, if I give everybody the budget, they're just going to come in at the budget. And I said, yeah, but that's to your advantage. That's a benefit to you. And they couldn't get their head around that. Remember, in government or a big organization, people have to defend their value and the things they're doing for the organization. So, it's easy for them to be targeted and picked on if they're giving out the budget, especially if they're not afforded the opportunity to explain why it makes sense for them to give the budget when they're buying this kind of stuff, right? Procurement people aren't stupid people. 50 years ago, you got into procurement because you knew how to add, right? you're handy, you were the reception person, male or female at the front desk, and they could keep numbers. Let's get them to buy all our stuff. Now people are coming out of university with master's degrees going straight into procurement. But still the focus is on buying commodity goods as opposed to services. Plan C, ask for a budget range. Can you tell me where about you are? Like, are you in the $10,000 range? Are you in the $100,000 range? What are you expecting to pay for this? The downside is you might have to present two prices, which is a little bit more work for you. But it's better than one big wrong price, right? I'd say you have a 30% chance of an answer. People, when they're not giving an actual number, they're saying, sometimes they'll say things like, well, that's plan D. You can ask, tell me what budget universe I need to be in. Are we making Chevettes or are we making Corvettes here? But plan D is, okay, tell me what the wrong number is. And they'll laugh and say, $10 zillion. But now at least they're talking, right? And then they'll start saying, you got a really good chance of an answer here. They say, what if that number doesn't make sense? If I came in somewhere like at 80 grand, would that make sense? And they might say something like, I can't tell you what the right number is. I'm not even going to tell you what the range is. But if you came in and said, we're going to do this project for $50,000, what I would tell you is we did 5 of those projects last year for $3,000 each. So your 50 looks like 5 of ours at 15, right? So you don't get a real answer, but now you know where you're playing. It at least can give you a sense of whether you should bother responding or not, right? Questions? Sir?
So if you still, do you have any?
Nope.
Okay. So if they still don't give you an answer, does it make sense to give them the Chevette versus the Corvette? And say, okay, this much value for this much money and this much value for this much money. It's like an enhanced version.
Yeah, you know what? You're guessing, right? Like, so should you guess low or should you guess high? Either way, it's going to be a guess.
I say both.
Or, yeah, that's plan C, I think. Ask for a range and give them 2 prices.
Even if it's a big one.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, so, you can do whatever you want. Some people would call your bid non-compliant if you don't have one price, and it gets rejected. But, there's more voodoo here than there is science in RFPs. Even there's a guy, Alex Zakariev, he's a PhD at Toronto, and he did an analysis of software that is used for scoring proposals, responding to RFPs. And he said, it's so arbitrary. Like the scoring systems, like we'll go, well, let's make this 1 to 10, right? Or no, let's make it 1 to 50, and we'll give 5-point increments. So, he said it's like if you scored everyone using Fahrenheit and then switched it to degrees Celsius, you would have different winners just because the system has changed. And so when procurement people or department people start reinventing the scoring systems, it can change who's going to win. Lisa Stiver is a partner at Thompson Dorfman Sweatman, and she and I have done a presentation similar to this. She does a lot of procurement law. And sometimes when an RFP is issued, the perspective by the buyer, usually the procurement person, maybe not the department line, is like, we've got to give everybody a chance. And so you end up with like, well, this company got 89.5, and this one's got 90.5. And Stiver's philosophy is you have to create scoring systems that create separation. Right? So you're either getting 0 or 10 out of 10. There's no, let's give this person 6.5. Right? You want to take that uncertainty out. It should be binary. Especially things like customer service. Okay, tell me the difference between 6.5 and 7 on customer service. Who knows, right? So it should be, and we'll get to this, there should be more binary things for things like these intangibles like customer service. Okay, so that's plan D. And you can suggest numbers to them. Say, okay, well, what if I came in at this? Does that make sense? And they might say something like, we'll look at a proposal like that. Or they might say, don't waste your time. You might get some hints from them. Usually not on the record. Okay, here's what buyers will tell you when you ask for a budget. Everyone will come in at a number. I explained to you the philosophy of the Hydro guys. Someone said this to me in the spring. Well, we don't want to leave money on the table. So you would rather have an incompetent supplier that could do it cheap than a competent supplier that would do it at a fair market value. There was an organization, a government organization in Winnipeg that issued an RFP 5 years ago. They did a really great job. They identified the budget, scoring criteria was clear. They made one fatal mistake. So they identified the budget, 100 grand. And then they said, hourly rate is 60%. I'm like, what? Everyone's got to do it for 100 grand. Why do you care how many hours they take? Because the idiot that doesn't know what they're doing is going to have a low hourly rate and going to take a long time, which burns through the buyer's resources too, because you're babysitting the vendor, right? Or it's going to take longer to get done. Whereas the expert, who's done this a lot of times, is going to do a great job, is going to use fewer hours, but they're going to have a really high rate. So what you've done is just cook the process to guarantee that you're going to get a first-year financial advisor right out of school instead of Warren Buffett for the exact same price. And when I phoned them and suggested that they were fools, but I did it politely. They said, but Cal, we've got to tell people apart somehow. And that's their challenge, right? These people don't work in your industry. You need to make it easy for them to see why your intangible claims of we're the best are actually real. Okay? So there's two parts here. These people need to get better at their job, but you need to get better at yours. Right? You're selling intangibles. Sometimes those are just hours you're selling. But the big money is selling expertise. So, sorry, back to this, don't want to leave money on the table, then say, tell you what, do the Brooks Act type 2 envelope system. Pick the most qualified and start negotiating with them, right? If there's money to be saved and they can help you do that, they will. This is a great one. When I did the seminars with the buyers and the vendors, 2 buyers from 2 different government organizations. One of them said, Cal, we're government. We can't tell you what the budget is. But every time I've asked a government buyer to show me the legislation or the procurement policy that says that, they can't show me. The government person next to them says, you can do whatever you want. You can disclose budget, you just have to disclose it to everybody, right? And that's what I'm arguing, disclose it to everybody. Gail, do you remember ever seeing a piece of legislation or policy that said you shall not disclose budget when tendering for professional services?
No, it seems to be just Treasury Board policies or interpretation thereof.
Yeah, it's past practice, which people are saying we've done it this way before. So, 100 years of tradition unencumbered by progress. Other question?
Sorry, yeah, follow-up question. You're talking about the Brooks thing, your sequential thing, more qualified, work it out, you can't come to the unit one and number 2. What are there ethical issues to say, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to pick the top 3, and we're going to negotiate with all 3 simultaneously?
Yeah, there's a thing out there that I haven't followed or picked up on yet. It's like best bid, last bid or something like that, where I think it's like that. Okay, you 3 could do the work. Here's your chance. Give us one number. Someone's going to win it, right? But even then, the buyer has an opportunity, the vendor has an opportunity to make a more informed decision and a more informed price because they've theoretically had some interaction with them, right? So this typically is not true. This is what would be a good word? I don't know. Bogus, yeah. So this is an interesting one. And for the first little while, I thought, well, how do I get around this one? And they said, look, we're not engineers. We have no idea what a bridge costs. That is a fair comment. But you know what they can tell you? They can tell you how much they can afford to spend on a bridge, right? We got $80. We need a steel bridge. Okay, it's not going to happen for $80. You're going to need $200 million. Oh, okay, that's not going to happen. So now, no RFP required, right? But before anyone issues an RFP, what they should have done is called someone in the industry and say, look, we're going to do an RFP. I know we've got $100 million. Can we build a bridge? Like, does anyone build bridges for $100 million? And say, well, yeah, 80 to 120 million. Yeah, you're in the ballpark. Go right ahead, right? But if they said, look, we got $20 million. We're hoping that we can, someone can put a toll booth or something on the other end to finance it for us. I think those are called P3s now, right? That's a different story. So, someone recently did. I was sent an RFP for a website that was really bad, and they assumed that $4 or $5 grand was going to build a very nice and complex, highly interactive, chock full of video website. It was probably $80,000. They had no idea, right? If they had put out their RFP saying our budget is $5 grand, the birds chirping would have alerted them to the fact that maybe something's wrong here, right? Okay, free consulting. I have no idea what time it is. 8 o'clock?
Almost.
We got to move it along here then. Enough of my stories. We got 80 or 100 slides. You'll be out of here by midnight, I'm sure. Spec Creative. Anyone connected to the GDC would know that they've been fighting this for a long time, right? Spec Creative. In my day, when I was a punk working in an ad agency and art department, it was like invite 7 ad agencies to come in, if you could find 7 in Winnipeg, and do a whole campaign for no money, and then we'll pick the purple one because my wife likes that color, right? Bad strategy, bad creative, all kinds of waste. Considered unethical, and GDC does a great job of stating that on their website. Our members will not do this. If you're a member of a professional association, I think the best way for professional associations to drive value into the membership is to address the procurement issues, especially in professional services. I think GDC is doing a good job of it. In my lifetime, that has changed. The norms, the business norms have changed. It's like in my lifetime, I've seen people don't smoke at their desks anymore, and far fewer are asking for spec creative from ad agencies. Although I work out of the house, so I can drink at my desk all I like. I can't smoke, though. So free consulting can also be detailed estimates, detailed project schedules. We don't know how long it's going to take. Well, let's just put out an RFP, and we'll get all this information that we don't know how to do or put together because we got to go to our boss and give them all this stuff. And you hear consultants talk about this. I speak to consultants. I've spoken on this subject all over Canada, all over the U.S., in the Caribbean, and in Europe. And I've spoken to Institute of Management Consultants in the U.S., tons of their chapters, Canadian Association of Management Consultants, Women in Consulting, you name it. And I hear this all the time. It should be called a request for free consulting, right? It's like a standard international joke. But no, what's happening is the people in Vancouver think they're the only ones who are having this problem, and then the ones in Toronto think. And then I go to Europe, and they're having the same. They're making the same jokes. It's crazy. If they ask for specific recommendations, give us 3 options of what we should do. Competitions are brutal. I was in a meeting a little while ago, and one of the board members said, you know what, instead of paying someone to do a logo, let's have a competition. I'm like, well, hold on, we're going to have to, you know what, these people would be out because their professional association would not permit them to participate. Sorry, was there a question? No?
You mentioned about submitting 2 budgets earlier.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the standard, or what about 3 budgets?
Multiple budgets would be not any sort of standard, but sort of a Hail Mary pass. Unless they ask you for, give us a really expensive option and a really cheap option. So typically they want one number.
Because the video production business is notorious for people saying, oh, I want to do a video on this, but they don't tell you how much they have to spend.
Right.
So we kind of do like a optimal, medium, and
Right.
economical. So
Yeah. There was one company I worked with that always did ranges on everything. And I thought, what's the procurement person doing with this? Like they're either picking the low one or picking the high one and maybe taking some midpoint, but you don't know, right? So, and there's opportunity for you to say, look, there's confusion here or there's lack of clarity. We remove this proposal from the process, right? They haven't committed to a number. So yeah, there's no industry standard there. But this is, okay, remember I said Red River did a good job? Paint us a picture. This takes us into the Red River story.
Sorry, just, can you back up again to the slide there, the competition one? Isn't that how architects get jobs?
Yeah. Lots of them, yeah. The big ones, there'll usually be some fee, and I believe the architecture colleges or institutes have some standard that whoever wins will be paid what the fees should have been for that. Whoever comes in second would have been paid 75% of those fees or 25% or something. And there's some sliding scale. So there is some competition. But the reality is you're doing a lot of work for free, right?
Is there something to be said for, people who are just coming into the industry and need to just get exposure? That's the big word, right? I was talking to a company just recently where they put out a competition for a logo. And they said, well, this is how we got our exposure by entering a competition for the trade that they did. And, I was trying to explain to them because I'm part of the GDC, what their points are on this.
Right.
But they said, it was completely legit, and it gave people just coming into the industry a chance to show their work.
Who said that, the buyer or the vendor that submitted?
The vendor that submitted.
Yeah.
Is that legitimate at all? Or is,
I'd say no.
yeah.
I mean, you're not going to earn a living entering logo contests,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, sometimes do you discount your fees? Yeah. Sometimes things are really slow and you'll do things a lot cheaper than you would do if things were. So there's always elasticity in the fees out there. But
To do something completely free,
yeah, I mean, we could spend a lot of time on that. I would say you're not going to build a business compete, doing free logos on spec. If you are, then there are services out there where I'm going to design a logo and throw it out there and see if someone will give me $50 for it, right? But even the design firms, you do a logo for a company and they're paying you well. Say they're paying you $20,000 for a logo, and you're going to show them 3 or 4 concepts, and you may really like 3 of them, and they pick the 4th. Well, you take these 3 and you put them in the used logo pile. And maybe you can resell them somewhere down the road. Like maybe the next time you get $20,000, you go, hey, we got 3 right here. Would you like these? So competitions are an interesting and ugly scenario. But even in a competition, the winner should be paid market value, not some honorarium. But that's typically what happens in a competition. It's still just an honorarium. So even if you win, you're not getting, subsistence type fees. Anyway, okay, so I got to move on. Anything that gets you starting to solve their problem is free consulting. That's spec creative. And there's a fine line between detailed scoping and free consulting, right? Sometimes you have to put some effort into thinking about the problem and how you might approach it to give them a good price. But if they're asking you stuff like we're going to see here, that's inappropriate. So this is bad RFP, good response. This is there's an RFP put out. It had some bad stuff in it. This is how the vendor addressed it. And I thought the buyer did a good job of responding. They asked for a methodology of the gala event theme and decor. A methodology of the gala event. I don't even understand what that means, really. It's for event planning services. They also wanted detailed pricing. So the vendor comes back and says, look, in order for us to respond to your RFP, we'd actually have to plan the event and come up with a theme. But that's what our clients pay us for, right? So you're asking us to do the work for free in hopes that we might win it, right? We'd hope to be able to compete based on our expertise, experience. So here's a real example of how someone tried to address that, right? They came back and said, okay, how about this? Tell us your process and plan to integrate, develop, and deliver. Blah, what? I don't know. And then you want to say, give us your vision. And they got even more specific. Paint us a picture of what the gala. So they just came back to the same thing. Tell us what we should do. And if we like it, we'll pay you for it. And this kind of burned the person because he knew there were only 2 people who could do this in the city. So if he backed away, the other person was going to get it by default, right? At the end of the day, this is what this person responded with. We appreciate the opportunity, but we've decided not to submit. Please keep us in mind for future events. See, when you're selling to potential customers, you're training your customers on how they're going to work with you, right? So in this case, if they ever went and worked with this organization again, the organization would know this is how they're going to have to do that, right? You are going to lose a lot of RFPs. You're going to lose a ton. You just don't want to lose so many that you go broke. So when I contacted the organization, which I think I spilled the beans, it's Red River, I emailed the VP and they said, you know what? I said, look, I'm a consultant that works in this area. I'm not trying to win any of these RFPs, but both of them came across my desk because people felt they were inappropriate. So I'm calling you to say, if you want to have a 10-minute conversation, I'll tell you what I would do in your shoes, and maybe the next time you can get better responses from vendors like the one that walked away because they wouldn't do the work for free. And when they heard that, they said, you know what, yeah, we shouldn't be doing that. We don't know much about this, so tell us. And anyway, there were about 7 different points that I said, look, if you change this, this, and this, you'll get better responses, and it'll be less of a burden on the vendor community. And they said there was about 4 of the 7 or whatever that they said, yeah, you know what, we can do those. 3 of them, no, we don't believe what you're saying, Cal. But these 4 will do that. So I took that as a win, right? So you see, I give you 3 examples of the responses when I challenge someone on an RFP, right? One, like the one group just ignores me. Another says, yeah, maybe you're right, but we don't care anyway. And the other one was, you know what, some valid points there, we'll make some changes. RFPs should be evaluating the claims you make about your ability to do this work, not trying to taste test your work in advance. Okay, we're going to go through this quickly. You can say, my profession will let me do this. You can say, and so we're walking away. You can say, could you please issue an amendment? can you you can propose without complying and see where that goes. Usually not very well. Or you could propose and comply. So this is what number 1 looks like. Our clients pay us what you have asked to for free. Our professional designation prevents us from doing this, and I've seen that with the GDC, whatever, the LGD, blah, that, whatever you guys have now. None of your acronyms make sense, by the way. GDC is somehow the Society of Graphic Designers. I don't know. Drove me out of the profession, it did. So we can't do this, and sometimes that shocks people. Say, what? There's a professional that says what I've just asked them to do is unethical? They'll take a second look at things. But you always have to be prepared to walk away for these reasons. You could request an amendment, and I've seen people use this kind of language. We can't do this, but if I'll have the executive director of a professional association contact you. If you can change that, then the accredited firms can participate. There are all kinds of weird stuff. Like in law, they can't be prepaid for legal services, even though there's prepaid legal services being advertised all over the place. It's very strange. You can say...
Can you go back to the number 2?
Yep.
The interesting thing there for me is you mentioned a third party twice. So have the ED contact you, not me.
Yeah.
I'm not telling you how to change it. I'm having some...
Yeah. So that, of course, presumes that you are part of some professional association, right? Like if you're an architect, you're obviously got an association behind you, a designer. Maybe it's even Kevin at New Media Manitoba who gets up on a stump and starts railing about all these inappropriate things, right? There you go.
Thanks, Cal.
You're welcome. Just set this impossible task. Kevin's going to change the RFP, so life is great for all of you. So there, and this one we talked about. So propose without complying. The reality is you're probably going to get booted as non-compliant, so you're probably wasting your time. Or you could just propose and comply, and sometimes you just have to do it. And you hate it, but sometimes the buyer just gets to make the rules, and if you want to do business with them, great. We don't want to be there, though, so good luck. Yeah, we'll skip through that. So whatever you decide to do, assertive but not aggressive. Respectful of both parties, trying to find a win-win for both sides, not telling them that they're a bunch of goofs and you will never work with them. Your perspective is to try and help the buyer, because remember, you are the expert at buying your services. You will be part of a purchase of your services far more often than any buyer will, especially an institutional one. So you're the expert at buying, not them. And make sure your association's behind you. This can be a tough one, though, because not all associations want to get into this scrap. And educate the offending organization at executive level. Don't just go back to the procurement person. If you've tried that and they haven't responded, then go to the executive. Make sense? Why don't we take a quick break there, Kevin?
Yeah.
How does that sound?
Let's say 5 minutes if we got a few more slides to go through. So.
Yeah, 5 minutes would be great.
Yeah.
No one's going to come back in 5 minutes.
Yeah,
But we'll say 5 minutes and then politely roll back around 12.
Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great.
As I mentioned, washrooms down the hall. We have snacks back here. There's still plenty of M&M cookies back.
Kurt, we're okay?
We're good.
Perfect, okay. Will be shared with all vendors. This doesn't make sense to me. Here's how you get around it. They tell you that if you got something proprietary and confidential, then label it as such, and we won't share it. So I tell people to label all their questions as proprietary and confidential as part of their proposal submission, so they can't share your questions. Okay, if you're a stupid vendor standing next to a smart vendor, and the smart vendor's smart enough to know, they have to ask, do you know if there's any dynamite in that box? Because if there is, the process requires we lift it up and shake it. So if there's dynamite, we want to know that so we can remove it first. And the stupid vendor might not think, well, who would think there's dynamite in this box? And they just pick it up and shake it and blow themselves up. That's a bad example. First time I've ever tried that one. So let's just say, if a really smart vendor asks a question that will help deliver a better proposal, and a stupid vendor never even thought of that, but suddenly has been educated at the expense of the smart vendor, that's unfair. That's inappropriate. An RFP is supposed to be about creating a level playing field. A level playing field is, I'll give you and you and you all the same information. I will allow each of you the same opportunity to ask me questions, but I'm not going to share your intellectual property amongst each other, right? And that's what they're doing. When you're selling expertise, and maybe some of you don't see yourselves as doing that, but a lot of you are selling expertise. That's what you're selling. And when you share, when a vendor, or buyer, shares your questions and their answers to it, they're sharing your expertise, and your advantage is going away. So I know a lot of firms will choose not to ask questions that will allow them to do a better proposal if those questions are going to be shared. Some firms will ask questions to try and throw off the dumb vendors. So the dumb vendors go, why did those guys know what they're doing? Why did they ask that question? And then they end up building in something into their proposal that helps to derail them. Submit your questions in written form, mark them as confidential. So if your question is, hey, on page 7, you said 10,000, and on page 9 in the RFP it said 11,000, which one is it? Yeah, sure. Share that with everybody. Or I just got one today sent to me from out of Toronto, and the due date was like a month ago. So like all this person sent me was the question and answer addendum, which was 7 pages long. And about 13 people asked about the date issue. So this is interesting. That RFP sent to me out of Toronto, and the guy says, I'm not even going to send you a proposal, just the addendum. It's for website design. Tell me if you've ever heard of this. When you're doing a big construction project and say it's $10 million, if you're the construction firm, you might have to put up a $5 million bond, construction bond. In case you go broke or run away or whatever, then they have $5 million to finish the project or clean it up or whatever. When you do websites, if you do websites, typically you would get a 50% or 20% or whatever deposit before you would start working. This organization wanted website developers to post a performance bond. So if, say, you're quoting $25,000, they wanted you to post a $12,500 performance bond for a website. And this guy emails me and says, Cal, is it like that in Manitoba? Because I've never seen this here before. And I said, so I phoned the guy up and I got his voicemail and said, run away, get away from this as fast as you can. There's nothing good that can happen here. There was all kinds of weird stuff like that. Government agency, every design had to be approved by their board or director level. The deadline for submissions is November 7th. Massive website that has to translate into 18 languages is due on December 31st of this year. I'm sure the budget's $12,000. No, $1,200 probably. Anyway, this is a dangerous place to be. Let's not spend a lot of time on it. This is the big one. Questions and answers are shared. No, sorry, this isn't the big one. This is the big one. Evaluation criteria are unclear. In the seminars I was telling you about, where we got a bunch of buyers and a bunch of vendors, 2 buyers talking about the same thing, evaluation criteria. One buyer from a big crown corporation says, I'm tired of getting proposals filled with marketing fluff. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I know why you're getting marketing fluff, because your evaluation criteria is so broad and generic. They're jamming everything they have about their company into proposal, hoping you see something you like and pick them. And of course, the other buyer picked up on the same line of thought and said, you're getting fluffy responses because you issue fluffy RFPs. They basically said, if you're getting bad responses, it's because you're rating bad RFPs primarily around evaluation criteria. So let's use, so these are the rules, right? Here's how you're going to get an A+, here's how you're going to get an F in this class. That's really what an RFP decision criteria should be evaluating. And for professional services, for anything, it should be defined clearly. There should be an obvious weight to it. And it should have an objective, well-defined scoring rubric. So let's go through a real-life example. Because you're going to make these claims of expertise. You're going to make claims like you're the best. What they're saying is, okay, here's how you should prove to me, the buyer, you're the best. Here are the rules. Because anybody can get up and claim to be an expert, right? The tear that I've been on the last year or so has been, when you're selling your services, you need to define clearly what your area of expertise is. You need to communicate that clearly, but anybody can do that. Anybody in one night can have a website up that says they're an expert and communicates that clearly, but buyers want proof of your expertise. So how are you going to provide tangible evidence of this intangible claim? There's a guy by the name of Jerry Gray, Dr. Jerry Gray, the former dean of the Faculty of Management at the University of Manitoba. And he taught me organizational behavior many moons ago. And he used to say, when people are making decisions about intangibles, they look for tangible clues. when we were looking for a school for our daughter who was 4, we went to look at different schools. I don't know anything about teachers. I mean, I was taught part-time at university, but I don't know how do you tell which is a great kindergarten? What do? Is the kindergarten teacher drunk? Right? Is there blood spatter on the wall? Is the place filthy? Are the kids running amok? You look for tangible evidence of the quality of the experience, right? Similarly, if you said, I'm an expert at something, and I said, prove it, how would you do that? I don't need an answer. We don't have time. So you need to be able to do a good job of that, but they need to give you the rules of the game. So here's an evaluation criteria from a real RFP for event management. Demonstrated experience in major event venue design, including floor plan. Okay, so tell us what you've done in the past. Okay, 60%, fine. Total fees price, 30%. Overall approach, 10%. This is probably fairly typical of the type of stuff you see, right? Better than some, not as good as others. So let's look at clear definition. Okay, it's got a green Y because I say, yes, I think that's fairly clear. Looking at this, I'd say, yeah, I could, okay, you want to see case studies or something of what I've done on event venue design and floor plans. Okay, I can show you that. I know what I need to give you. Total fees, price. Okay, so almost a third of this is going to be on price. Overall approach. What the hell is that? What does overall approach mean? And I see this all the time. How would you say, here's why you should give me 10% for overall approach? What is overall approach? Is it you approach this from a pessimistic perspective or an optimistic perspective? Or did you approach it with vibrant color or dark colors? Or what, like fast or slow? I have no idea what that means. This fails.
I always think when I see that they mean, and maybe they don't, because maybe I'm not very successful with these, but that they mean how do you, your work method, like if you work in a creative area, do you do a creative brief? What's your process?
Yeah.
I think that, I know it's vague, but that's
Yep.
sort of what I think of it.
Sure. So you've made an interpretation which may be reasonable, but we don't know if it's what they're thinking, right?
Well, I figure that
That's-
whatever it is, that what I'm giving them gives them a little window into,
See, you know what I see when I see this?
you know?
Wiggle room to award it to whoever we want,
Oh, yeah.
because it's so poorly defined.
Yeah.
I think part of me agrees with you, what you just said, but I think number one is retrospective, like what have you done? Number two is, okay, what's the price?
Yep.
And number three is, what are you going to do? What's your vision for this?
So that's free consulting.
Okay.
Start solving the problem for us. Tell us how you'll fix our problem for us. What are you going to do here? So then it's free consulting, or it's ambiguous, so that we can award it to our buddy or whatever, right? I mean, RFPs are a great way to disguise bad things, right? Look what's going on in the whole construction industry in Montreal there, right? Like, I mean, Gail and I work in the same department, and we used RFPs, and if I wanted to, I could write an RFP to get whatever design firm I wanted on that project, right? You could do that. So, and then I could say, hey, I used the process, right? Because the process is flawed. So, but we can take the flaws out of it. Kevin?
So to fix it then, would you, if I was the vendor, should I say something like, describe to me your process? Is that a fair thing to ask?
If that's what they're looking for, because methodology or the process you're going to use is often requested, right? So let's keep going through this, okay? So is it clear? Well, we don't know. We can't decide what overall approach is, so it's not very clear to me. Now let's look at weighting. Okay, yeah, this is pretty straightforward. I know what has the most value here, so this is what I should spend the most time on, is my expertise and how I'm going to demonstrate that. Now, the downside is, remember I talked about Stiver saying that the evaluation should create separation? Well, if the scoring rubric doesn't facilitate that, then it's going to come down to price anyway. So even though everything else is 90%, but approach is the only thing that has clear, hard, and fast and objective evaluation, it's going to come down to that. So it may not really be 90 and 10. It might be, that 10% might be 100% at the end of the day, right? So now let's look at the scoring rubric. Okay, I have no idea what I have to submit to demonstrate evidence of this. What this should say is something like, provide 3 case studies of projects you've done in the last 3 years of a value between $5,000 and $50,000 in the hospitality industry in Manitoba, or whatever, as narrow as they need it to be, right? It should be sufficiently narrow so that we don't have, 38 firms responding like the first slide. But big enough that 3 to 6 could respond, right? And if some idiot wants to take a flyer and do a Hail Mary, Doug Flutie type proposal, then they can. But as a procurement person, they've been responsible. Now here's another one. Total fees price, 30%. Nope, this fails too. How do I get 30 out of 30? Does the lowest price get 30 and everybody else gets 0? Does the lowest price get 30, the highest gets 0, and then it's graduated in between? Because if it's 0 or 30 and only one person is getting 30, then everything is going to revolve around this, right? So they haven't told me how they're evaluating price. Who knows? Maybe they're talking about, well, no, it says total fees price. Okay, so why would you need fees / price? Total fees would be the project cost. Price might be the hourly rate. What are they really asking for here? Do I need to provide 2 numbers or 1? An overall approach. Well, because we have no idea what it means, and they haven't told us how they're going to score it. I mean, they might say it's something like this. They could say, use a case study to illustrate the process you use to work with a firm like ours, right? Then I would know what I would know what that means, and I would know what I have to provide to score 10 out of 10 on that, right? This, although this looks like it's actually some kind of science or structure, is crap because of this scoring rubric thing. What it does is mean that anybody could score anything and could defend their selection because they used an RFP. We used an RFP. We had scores, we had weighting, right? So this can mask their bad behavior. So what do? Request clarification. Okay, sorry, can you tell me how you're going to score 60 and how you're going to score 0? And they'll usually say something like, well, we're going to look at it and we're going to talk about it and we're going to decide and we'll make an evaluation. Okay, but against what criteria? And then they'll get lost and then you can ask them specifically about price. Okay, so is it 30 or nothing? Or do I get part marks for being second cheapest, or et cetera, et cetera? Can you define overall approach? I'm not sure what you mean by that. And how do I get 0 or 10 in category 3? But can you tell me what I need to show you? I want to make this easy for you, so tell me what you need from me. And they'll say things like, well, we can't tell you what to provide. Okay, just tell me how you're going to evaluate what I provide, and then I'll give you something that can help with that. So you just want them to say, this is a test. Here's how you score 100. Here's how you score 0. When I was in the university, I would say, here's what a good answer looks like. Here's what a bad answer looks like. They can say, oh, okay. They need specific evidence of your expertise. So things like customer service. This comes up in RFPs all the time. Customer service, 35%. What? What does that mean? How do I demonstrate it? So what you get are, you get gross, fluffy statements like, for over 25 years, our company has excelled beyond our client expectations, blah, 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 blah. It's okay. Does that get 35 or does that get 0 or is that 15? Well, we'll give them 15. It's completely arbitrary, right? There's a guy who's a fellow of the Certified Management Consultants of Canada in BC, and he teaches at Royal Roads. And he's got some great stuff about things like this. Make these binary. Make these yes or no. Instead of, tell us why you should get 10% or 3% or 6%, say, look, we need a certain level of customer service here. Okay, now, I'm talking from a buyer's perspective, but from your perspective, if you had to give evidence to try and score 35%, you might say things like, here's tangible evidence of how we will serve you. Our team will be available to meet in Boston in person within 12 hours' notice. If you were a buying audience, I would say, make it a binary or a mandatory criteria, just a yes-no checkbox. If you can't do this, we're not going to try and grade you out of 35. We need this or we don't. If we don't evaluate it. If you do, make it mandatory, right? We will provide telephone and email access during the go-live period, right, for 24 hours a day. Or we will adopt your respectful workplace and employee standards handbook as our own. Whatever. You're giving them real, tangible evidence. Here's how we're going to do this, right? So when we talk about expertise, and actually my book is all about this. The Consultant with Pink Hair is, and by the way, if you ever want to write a book, I can tell you exactly how you do it. You tell your spouse you're going away on Friday, and you're coming back Sunday, and you're having a book with you, or you're not. And because for 10 years you've been trying to write this book and it's driving you crazy. And so you go to the lake where there's nobody there and you take 3 frozen pizzas and 1 bottle of rum and you sit down, you make a fire and you start writing. And you come home with 20,000 words and you tell your spouse, I got a book. And then you realize, I got half a book. And you finish the other half at home on the weekends. That's how you write a book. It's that easy. But the book is a fictional story of a small consulting firm struggling with, why do people buy our product? Why do people hire us? What are they buying from us? Is it service? Is it our personality? Is it what? Is it us? And my argument is that it's expertise. No one goes to a lawyer because they want more Christmas cards. No one goes to a lawyer because they like that lawyer. They're in jail. They need to get out of jail. They're getting a divorce. They need to get divorced. So there's certain end game that they need to achieve. You hire an architect because you need some outcome, right? A building, a bridge, or whatever. You look for who's done that before. Who has done that type of expertise? Who's done that type of video? Okay? Who's done a video with farmers versus a video with investment bankers, right? Functionally, you're doing something very similar, but the categories are different, right? You might have different equipment when you're with farmers. You might have a quadricopter or whatever it is you guys just bought. Yeah, that's right. And geographic expertise. If you're working in Quebec, things might be a little bit different than working somewhere else, right? A lot of management consultants might advise on retail sales strategies. But a retail sales strategy in downtown Toronto versus the northern store in Iqaluit is very different. Someone who's done a lot of work up north would be your first choice reasonably if that's the type of organization you run. Okay? So you want to be able to define, communicate, and prove your functional expertise. So what is it you do? And you want that to be fairly narrow, not fairly broad. The category, the type of client you know best, right? And the geographic expertise, where you would be considered a leader. And you prove this stuff using case studies. What you're trying to do is, I have some expertise. You're trying to tell people and prove to them that you're an expert who have some expertise. Experts speak, experts write, experts teach. They have case studies that demonstrate, and there's other tactics too. But this is how you prove expertise. So these are the things you should be trying to collect along the way to help you prove your claims in a proposal. Media attention too. Media goes to experts for comment, right? And if there was ever a time I should be clamoring for media attention, it should be the day that this hit, right? So anyway, these consultants is like it's a quest, right? What's the first line? It says, there's a guy on stage, and all these consultants are at a training session, and the guy on stage says, who are you? And the consultant's going, we don't know. So they spend 198 pages trying to figure that out. And they go, is it because we have nice offices? And they think that through. No, it's not because we have. It's like that book when you were a kid. Did you have that book? I had it. It was called Are You My Mother? Duckling walks up to the giraffe. Are you my mother? No, I don't think so. They do that. It's really, I ripped that off and just reframed it as a consultant with pink hair. And it all started in Chicago 10 or 12 or 15 years ago, whatever, when I did my first speaking gig, and some guy comes up to me and says, Cal, here's our problem. I'm a 5-person consulting firm. Everyone thinks we're the same as everybody else. We need to be different. I said, perfect. I have the solution for you. How many people in your office? 5. Great. Go to the dollar store, buy 5 pink wigs. Tell everybody in the office you're wearing pink wigs from now on. When you come into the office, everyone wears pink wigs. We're going to go out there and tell everyone we're the consulting firm with pink wigs. And he says, ha, very funny. While I understand how that might make me different, I'm not sure why our clients would care about what color hair is. And I said, yeah, but when you're talking about service, when you're talking about relationships, when you're talking about location, that's pink hair. They're buying expertise. If they got a pot of 3 management consulting firms and the expertise seems similar, they might go to the color of your hair. They might go to who's got the nicest or closest office. They might go to reputation about service in the marketplace. But you don't start there, right? No one pays more because you have a nice office. They pay more because you're an expert. Generalists get paid nothing. They charge for their hours. Experts get paid for their advice. You may not all be able to get there. Maybe that's not your business model. But those are the 2 extremes in selling professional services, right? That was the self-destruct thing. Yeah, it popped out of the holder. There you go. Thanks, sir. I remember when I was old and that age and had eyes that could see that far. I couldn't even see it swinging here. Anyway, that's it. We're getting in bad territory there. References. What will references be asked? If someone asks you for references and you've got to give references, call your references first and say, I'd like to give your name as a reference. What will you tell them? Just ask that question. What would you tell somebody? And your references go, oh, blah, because they'll be very uncomfortable that you've asked them that question. But then they'll tell you, they'll think about it. And here's why you would ask that question, because there may be things you don't know that are bothering them. You think you've got a great relationship, but their hesitation in the voice, they're great except for this one thing, that can kill you as a reference. But if you asked it up front, it's an opportunity to fix that. But the best buyers will just say, would you hire them again? Please explain why or why not, right? That's the one reference question or customer service question even, or quality assurance question that they should be asking. But if you can only ask your references one question, ask them that and see what they say. Maybe give you something valuable that you can use. So how do you really win RFPs? If the first time they see or hear of you is because you've written a proposal, your chances are very slim. So you need to get ahead of the RFPs. And this is a message that gets hammered home to me when I speak to buyers on behalf of my clients. These guys want to work with us. We never seen them. They never come around. They never tell us what they do. Conversely, when a client does that well, they say, you know what? These people didn't win this one, but they're going to work with us at some point because they've come around. It's been quite clear what they're good at. They're in our mind. We're waiting to use them, but we're waiting for the right project, right? They're going to win one of these one day, right? So do you think that may influence the scoring at some point? I'm sure it will, especially when we see bad evaluation criteria that people can wiggle around to get whoever they want to use, right? Your reputation should be walking in the door long before you do, and it should be an expertise-based reputation. Things like customer service are reasons not to hire you, not reasons to hire you. They hire you because you're an expert. If 3 or 4 people look like they have similar expertise, okay, let's look for a reason not to hire them. Well, they're too far away, right? We don't like the look of their suit. If your nuclear reactor is melting down, you don't care what the consultant smells like, looks like, talks like. You just want to know they can fix it, right? So be well positioned, and by position have the appropriate reputation in the marketplace as an expertise of a certain functional category and geographic type. Define, communicate, and improve it. That's your job in sales. And engage and educate institutional buyers before and after any RFP exists. Debriefings are great opportunities to introduce your firm to them for the next time as well, right? You lost, find out why. The good buyers want to see you long before they're issuing an RFP. I'm just trying to think of something that's going on in the federal government. The federal government has recently, the Canadian Association of Management Consultants has got a procurement, I won't call it a lobby group, but a special interest group, where they're speaking to the federal government about how they might improve the way they procure consulting firms or consulting expertise. And one of the comments that's come out of that is that there might be a move towards having it be the responsibility of the industry. Instead of fixing the RFP, we'll just make sure that the industry has an opportunity to, demonstrate their expertise to us. So as much as I like this, there's no way the procurement infrastructure of the federal government can keep track of or make time for every consultant to show up on their door and do their song and dance, right? So, but the beauty for you is most of them won't. They'll just wait for the RFP and respond. You need to get ahead of the RFP. And it's hard to do that if you're not narrowly positioned. Because if you can do anything for anybody, well, you don't have the resources to be in front of every single procurement person that could possibly hire you. You want to be in front of the 10 that you're most likely to win a project with, the projects that you do best and make the most money at. And make sure you're keeping your professional association in touch with hammering down the bad buyers the bad vendors and inspiring the bad buyers to do better things, right? Andrew Boardman from Man Overboard and Daniel Lamb designed my book. I think you know him. Ian McCausland shot that photo. That photo here is actually this. This is me on the Provencher Bridge. And Ian shot like 500 pictures, because you can do that now, right? They're free. They're just, and because I had a really bad idea for a book cover, and I was just hoping that Ian could do something magical to make it look good. So we took a whole bunch of pictures of me walking with a pink wig, and I said, look, I'm not wearing a pink wig, and I have no money for a model. I'm not paying someone because I can do this. That's me, right? And so this picture is actually me standing on this bridge at the end of about 2 hours, and it was cold. It was the springtime, and I'm like, we've got no good ideas. And I'm literally, this look of frustration. What are we going to do now? And Ian said, there's something there, and we gave 500 photos to Man Overboard. So, I remember it was Friday the 13th, and they sent me the mock-ups for my book cover, right? I'm looking at it on my BlackBerry, and it's like a Harlequin romance, pink, flowery stuff. It's like an equal opportunity manual or something for females in the consulting industry. I'm like, this is so not what I want. And I was so heartbroken, I couldn't tell Andrew that he completely did a crap job. And he knows we've had this conversation. So I wait till Monday and say, Andrew, I don't think we're there. He said, okay, well, we got another concept, but we didn't think you'd go for it. And it was me without a head. It was this exact concept. I said, that's perfect. But why don't I have a head? And he said, he was polite and didn't say, you're just that ugly, Cal. He said, I don't know, Dan did that and just looked right. And I said, yeah, I know it looks right, but I can't explain it to anybody. Let's just go with it. So we did. So now my parents still don't understand why it's like this. And I don't really understand either, but it just works for me. And so Ian and Andrew and Daniel did a great job there.
You're holding the hair there?
Yeah, it's a pink wig, actually. Of course, I had bought 3 of them because we didn't know which pink wig would be right? So my 11-year-old, or at that time 10-year-old daughter was just like, oh, Dad, what are you doing with those wigs in your office? Or when are you going to be done with those? So,
you know how I would explain that? I would say that without the head, you're not overthinking. You don't have to overthink the process anymore. It's based on the information you've given us today. It should be a straightforward, analytical process.
Yeah.
It doesn't require any overthinking. And when you have your head on, you tend to overthink. You
Well-
tend to overanalyze it. You tend to...
yeah, you got something there. One of the things I was thinking was that if there's nothing here, this doesn't matter, right? I don't know. But it's funny because I gave a book to someone. He started to laugh. And he's from the States. He said, what's that? He goes, there's a lady out there who bills herself as the consultant with pink hair. I thought, that's stupid. Why would anyone hire someone just because you have pink hair? Like, that's the stupidest. It's like you're saying publicly, I have no good reason for you to hire me. But I have pink hair, so I'm different, right? It's back to that I'm different, but I'm not relevant. Now, here's the other thing. My company is, 4432950 Manitoba Limited, whatever. Trading is Beyond Referrals, and I own the copyright in Canada, and I'm just waiting for the copyright in the U.S. So my company is Beyond Referrals. Some guy just wrote a book called Beyond Referrals about sales and marketing. Okay, so now, and he's in the States, so you're either crooked, right, because you're trying to trade off what I've created, or you're not very bright because you didn't even do a Google search. So I don't know, there's probably not much I can do about that without a lot of legal fees, which I'm not willing to spend. So anyway, if you're ever looking for Beyond Referrals and some old guy is there and it's not me, that's the problem. I'll always outrank him in the organic search because I have Beyond Referrals everything, but he's trying to buy Google ads all around me. So every now and again I make a bid for a really expensive Google ad just to turn him around. So this book is available at McNally Robinson. There's 2 copies here that someone will win. There's one. What did I do with the other one? Oh, okay. There's Kindle versions on Amazon, etc. If any of you are thinking of writing a book,
Yeah.
yes?
Yeah, Andrew is who I would use to.
Yeah, and there's probably lots of people who do a great job. Andrew's one who, does work with it. Yeah. So if you got questions about writing a book, that was an interesting process. That's not what the presentation's about, but I think we're almost out of time. Any questions? Sir?
I have a bit of a question about the current climate in Ottawa with defense,
Oh.
which used to be very heavy RFP and is now sort of morphed off into this standing offer, what is it, service agreement, standing offer,
Yeah.
and this weird proxy economy of firms that all they do is bid on RFPs for standing offers and service agreements, and then you end up working with those companies who might not even know you, but they've got the service agreement, and you end up getting the work, and you've got to pay them their piece.
Okay, so it's interesting because Jesse and I were talking about, Jesse, right? Yeah, we were talking about this earlier. You've been on these lists for a while, not getting much. I've been on them for 13 years. No one's even phoned me or sent me a Christmas card, for example. So I don't know what's happening. I think it's we were talking about it's a way to say that we're open and accessible. At the end of the day, it takes more than just getting on the list to get that stuff. The feds have changed a little bit. Merck's used to be the place for all RFPs, and now they have their own site. So I don't know. There's still stuff on Merck's, I guess, but it's not what it used to be. Maybe some provinces are still using Merck's, but you've got BC Bid and Alberta Purchasing Connection, and then there's this real, I think, a growth in proposal writing on your behalf services.
Well, it's not even that. It's like they've already written the proposal, they're already on the list, and then you've made a contact in the government, and they say, okay, how can we work? And you say, well, I know this firm I work with, I can do it through them. And
So then you sub to them and just, really? That's got to be absolutely unethical. Okay, whoever, they're pretty busy now because Mike Duffy and Pamela Wall and the ethics commissioner has taken up his time or her time by them, but that doesn't seem right to me. That's a good question. Anything else?
Just before we have any more questions, if you wouldn't mind just taking the opportunity to fill out your evaluation before we vote, I can of course continue with
Sure.
questions. I heard more questions. I just wanted to throw that out there. Thanks.
Sounds great. Gail Granger, and your firm is?
Gail Granger Communications.
Perfect, there we go.
Very great. I've noticed some RFPs on Merck's where they say, we are sort of announcing to you that we are doing this process and these firms will be out to bid. Is that the kind of thing that this fellow's talking about?
I'm sorry.
I've seen some things lately on Merck's where they say, we're doing this RFP process, and here are this list, we will only accept proposals from this list of firms, and there's like 12 of them listed or something.
Yeah, that's kind of like the
What
RFQ
is
thing,
this?
where you get pre-qualified, and you end up being one of 3 companies that gets consulted if it's over a certain limit, right?
Yeah, but I've seen them issue this statement saying.
So I think part of that might,
they're putting that.
the closest analogy I would make is that sometimes they sole source something, right? So they'll issue a statement of sole sourcing, and the industry then has like 2 weeks to challenge that. Say, whoa, no, they're not the only ones. We have the rights to sell that to you as well. Maybe it's something similar. We're doing this.
Usually it's 3 firms from a predefined shortlist. They get to choose which 3 firms.
Right.
And then those 3 firms, that is actually, they are actually validly bidding against each other.
Yeah, because I saw something similar for, I do communications, writing, strategy, all that kind of thing. And this was a few months ago, and they were sort of issuing a, call for qualifications, but for a whole bunch of work they might award, but they were only giving me something like 2 weeks to put this
Right.
together, and there was so much writing on it, I just didn't bother.
Yeah.
So
Oh, interesting.
That's a trend. That's what I see as a trend, is you get on those lists, and at least that's better, because you're not having to do it every time there's an RFP that comes out, right?
Yeah, pre-qualification lists are a great idea.
Oh, for
It's
sure.
kind of like the 2 envelope system almost, right?
What irked me about this
Yeah.
was, it was such a short notice period.
Yeah.
Before it closed. I was just looking through here, and I noticed that, Alberta does a whole bunch of these RFQs that go on for years. Like,
There's-
you have years to apply.
Yeah, Alberta Education had one that had like
Yeah.
5,600 people on it or something. Like, how could they ever possibly? That's
But I wonder what your thoughts are on that system.
that to me. I don't think that's a system. I think that's just in order to get to the castle, you have to go through this gate first, but you're still a long way from the castle. I don't know, like that.
Everyone's on the list, and no one's on the list.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's another layer of bureaucracy because someone made anyway. So I'll take more questions, but I just want to let you know that I'm not sure if this has been of value to you or not, but we're doing a session starting December and then the first Monday for 6 months in January. So first Monday of every month. And we're calling it a peer forum, so it's professional services firms only. And we're going to do a half day the first Monday of every month at the Manitoba Club, breakfast, refreshments, and lunch. And it'll be part lesson, part exercises, and part sort of peer networking, referral network stuff. And we're doing that for $199 a month. Boy, I sound like I work for Kmart up here. I don't know where the flashing blue light is. But we're going to do that. It's actually totally a 9-month program. So we're going to launch we're just going to have a get-together breakfast in December, and then it's going to be January through June. We'll have a half day a month. Plus, during that time, you can contact me and get some help specifically on your challenges. So it's group learning, some individual consulting, and then we're going to take the summer off, and for 2 months you can call us about your problems, but we're not going to have classes in the fall. So we're doing that if that's of interest to you. I have some printouts here of that, and it's on the home page of my website in the blog post. It's the most recent blog post. So, questions? More questions?
I thought it was very valuable.
Good. That's a statement, but we'll let that stand. I appreciate that.
I thought like all these proposals were like crafted by consultants.
By Nat? No.
You know, like I thought they were the holy grails that you got to follow this. It's
Nope.
you know, but it's good to know.
It's like this one out of Toronto. All I saw was the question and answer addendum, and it was obviously some guy who had only ever bought construction and decided, well, I'll just cut and paste from here. And that's what drives Lisa Stiver crazy, too. She says, you have as a lawyer, you have a legal document, which someone has put together by cutting this and pasting here and cutting this. And so it's a whole bunch of messed up legal documents, many times with conflicting terms within it. And her job is to come in and sort this out for really big procurement items, right? So what are the takeaways from this? One, no, geniuses have not put these together. In some cases they have, but it's more like, baling wire and duct tape in many cases. Good procurement people appreciate what they can learn from the process. I've spoken at about 6, 7 years ago, I went to the national conference for the Purchasing Management Association of Canada in Newfoundland. Stupidest thing I ever did was go on an island where there was no easy escape and stand up in front of 140 purchasing people and say you're doing it all wrong, right? But they listen to me, and I've got a great relationship with the PMAC folks, which are now something else now, strategic sourcing or something. They've just merged with another organization. They want to hear this stuff. They want to learn. The good ones want to hear from you, and they want to understand what you do because their job is to go find the best people. And so if they know who they are, they can help you, get that work. So it's not done by geniuses. They do want help. You have to get ahead of the RFP. I don't think sitting back and waiting for RFPs is a good strategy.
I think it's fair to say that sometimes the purchase process is bad because the core people who need it have just pushed it off to purchase.
Yes. Purchasing inherits bad policy, bad processes, bad prior practices, ignorance on behalf of the department that wants the services, possibly, or maybe something not quite above board. They want to work with a certain firm. But, procurement might have to wear some of the bad procurement as well. Just it's not their fault. There's a whole bunch of things going on. It's like the Wild West, I think. They've kind of figured out commodity purchasing, but professional services purchasing is a bit like the Wild West. Great. Question?
If there's an RFP that you do not want to respond to, but you want to let people know that you're interested in working with them in the future, just send them a quick email saying, I'm not going to propose this time, but next time I want you to keep me in mind.
Sure. But what I would say is, thank you very much for sending me the RFP if they sent it to you. Or, I've got this RFP. We appreciate the opportunity for your business. This isn't a good fit for our company. So immediately the question is, what is a good fit? So you need to tell them. We do this type of work for this type of client in this area, and we'd love to be included in any future opportunities you have. So they might call you up next time, or you might just have to stay in touch with them. But your job is to give them information that is valuable to them to do their job, which is to find it. So it's not to take them to hockey games, right? I had a client that opened an office in Ottawa just after the Senators went back there, and they said 2 years later we gave up our season tickets because there was some fiasco, happens in procurement. And like I said, no one from government would come to a hockey game with us because they were so afraid of being seen on TV with a supplier or something. They just so we just gave up the seats. So yeah, make yourself valuable to them. Is that it? Sir?
I have one question. So I work at an advertising agency, so this is very much our reality. And the biggest challenge, I think, is people looking for strategy. And I know you gave us a couple examples for how we might get them off of that, but I think for us, that's probably the hardest one is they don't necessarily know what they should do. We don't want to make recommendations based on next to no facts. And we also want to consult for free. So how can we not walk away, but guide them to provide us with more context, or to get them to that rubric that makes sense, right?
Okay, it used to be spec creative, and it's kind of morphed into spec strategy. Yeah. And it's hard for an individual to change an industry. I think a professional association can change an industry. So I would put some heat on your professional association to tell them that this is going on, because I know exactly what you're talking about. And